morning, everyone. My name is Attorney Devin Shanley. This again is story time. Thank you all for joining me. I'm starting a little bit early today, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the format of the story and delaying. I'll still start the story at 10 o'clock. I just wanted to start to go live and say hello, hello, and kind of go from there. This week, we will be doing the story of Cinderella. This is a personal favorite of mine when we talk about estate planning issues. But don't worry, kids, I'm going to get to the boring adult stuff after the story. So if you are watching, just stay tuned until I say we get to the boring adult stuff. Background of the story, it's classically a French fairy tale for those of you who are familiar with it, although it appears in many, many different forms and many different cultures as well. So when we talk about this, what I find really interesting, I was doing some research. In fact, my wife has a copy of an annotated Grimm's fairy tale collection. I'm not going to be reading from that today. That version is much longer. But when we look at this, it's important to know the classic tale that we know, and I'll be reading today, of balls and fairy godmothers and coachmen from mice and all of that fanciful stuff propagated by a very, very large corporation that I hope doesn't sue me, and I'm not going to be using any of their trademarked material today. Don't sue me. Instead of that, I mean, when we look, I was reading the actual classic version of the story, and in that one, there wasn't a fairy godmother. Instead, Cinderella went to visit the grave site of her mother who had passed away and wept, and actually had a magic tree there, and animals would give her the ball gown and everything that she needed from that because of a promise that her mother made. That was fascinating to me for different reasons, and I was like, well, maybe I should read this story at some point just to give a different perspective and talk about a different estate planning lesson, because that could go in a different direction than the one that we're going to be talking about now. Open format for this. What I'll do is I will read the story. I'll give a small lecture about what this connects to the law and how we can reinterpret this. And adults, as you share this with your kids, you can think about this in a different fashion. And then after that, I will open it up for a little bit of question and answer time. As we're talking about question and answer time, for those of you that watch regularly for my question and answers, you know that I take a couple questions ahead of time. So if you want to email me, please, you can contact me through Peterson, Berk Cross's website and submit questions. You can put it onto the Facebook page. That would be great. I like to stick to a certain area of law. This one will be estate planning. For those of you who don't know what estate planning is, estate planning is the area of law where we make connections, we make plans, we make documents in order to manage your property or your health or other important aspects of you when you can't act on your own. But if you have other areas of law and you wanted to connect about that, you can. So, without further ado, and again, I'm also going to thank the good people at Peterson, Berk Cross. That's the law firm I work at, where we specialize in you for helping co-host these events and helping promote them. So, if you have any questions that aren't addressed by this video or you don't get a chance to ask, you can contact myself or any one of the other attorneys over at Peterson, Berk Cross. We'll be more than happy to schedule a consultation and to help you out. So, without further ado, Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful girl who lived with her stepmother and her two stepsisters. The stepmother and stepsisters had very cruel hearts and treated the girl poorly. They made her do all the work, scrubbing the floors, mopping, doing the dishes, washing the clothes, cleaning the floors. I think they even had her vacuum, even though vacuums might not have been invented. The stepsisters dressed in the finest gowns and slept in the finest beds. The poor girl was only given rags to wear. She slept on a straw bed. Her sisters called her Cinderella because of her clothes were often covered in cinders and ash from the fireplace near her bed. Here we see a girl having a bad day, and the stepmother and stepsisters. One day, an invitation for the prince's ball arrived. The stepsisters were delighted. They spent the next few weeks picking out gowns and deciding how to style their hair. Cinderella wanted to go to the ball too, but the stepsisters laughed. "You?" they said. "Certainly not. There is too much work for you to do. You must clean the entire house and help get us ready." When the day of the ball arrived, the stepsisters left, and Cinderella cried. "I wish I could go," she said. As soon as Cinderella said this, her fairy godmother appeared. She touched Cinderella with her magic wand. The girl's rags turned into a gown of gold and silver. On her feet were glass slippers. Next, the fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a coach. She turned 6 lizards into coachmen, a rat into a driver, and 6 mice into horses. But, she warned, when the clock strikes midnight, the magic will be gone. Cinderella's beauty stunned everyone, especially the prince. When she and the prince danced, they danced so well, and they danced all night. When the clock struck 12, Cinderella ran from the palace, losing a slipper. The prince was puzzled. Who was she? How could he find her? All he had was one glass slipper. The next day he issued a proclamation. "I shall marry the girl who fits this slipper." The prince's servant traveled from house to house. He tried the slipper on every girl. It did not fit any of them. At Cinderella's house, the stepsisters tried. When the slipper did not fit, Cinderella asked, "May I try?" It fit perfectly. Cinderella's godmother appeared and touched Cinderella with her wand. The rags were once again changed into fine cloth, and 2 days later, Cinderella and the prince were married, and they lived happily ever after. All right, normally I have guests, and it's very clear because my guests leave to know that story time has done, and we're going to start to get to the adult stuff. But this is the time, kids. You can go and play. Adults, stick around. We're going to talk about what this means inside of estate planning. Now, the classic tale, and I kind of talked about this at the very beginning, is that Cinderella needed her father to talk to an estate planning attorney. Here we had a man who was very wealthy by all accounts of the story. He was a wealthy guy. And he could have hired an attorney. He could have gotten somebody to come in and have a better plan for Cinderella than to leave him with his now a second wife. Now, that's especially if you read stories and tales where he's just kind of like, "Man, I'm not sure about this girl that I married." Some versions you see that, and in which case he should have come up with a better plan. He should have made arrangements. He didn't. But really, to me, this story is about trust, especially when we look at it from that perspective. The man's first wife, Cinderella's mother, entrusted him to, if he was going to remarry a woman that was going to manage the household and take care of things. The man, the father, trusted that his daughter would be taken care of, and all of this trust placed in both of them was misplaced. The wrong people got in control. The stepmother treated Cinderella basically like a slave. The stepsisters were, let's just say, they never come off well in any reading of these stories. And they did everything they could to try and stop Cinderella from achieving her happily ever after. In today's world, this isn't that far off from what could happen out there. Now, it's not going to be quite as fanciful as, you know, human trafficking inside of domestic labor and things like that for most of the people watching this video, although that certainly exists. But what there is going to be inequity. There is going to be a certain amount of injustice that can be faced. And if you don't have a plan, these sorts of things can happen, especially if the wrong people get into place. So, as you're reading Cinderella, as you watch Cinderella, if you sign up for Disney Plus and you do that, hey Glenn, then what I would say is, as you watch this and you think about Cinderella, remember, plans rely upon people. We can put together the best documents ever, and if you have the wrong person running it, the plan isn't going to work. A lot of times in estate planning, and I had talked about estate planning at the very beginning, estate planning, people get caught up in the word estate, meaning the property end of it. What I have is I get a call and I go, Devin, I need to get a will. And I go, okay, that's great. What about this, this, and this? Because we want to get the right people in place. And they think I'm trying to upsell them instead of trying to address the major need that they actually probably have. Now, that is kind of the same thing here. For the most part, and this is a joke that I've been telling people a while, people have been dying for a while. And we generally know what to do with your stuff after you die. We don't know who you trust. We don't know who is going to do a good job of managing it, and we don't know who is trustworthy enough to make sure that the sales are right, the communications are right, and everything is going according to the plan. That relies upon you. And that is what we are going to form. So if you have any further questions about this, you can feel free to give me a contact at 920-831-0300 at Peterson, Berk Cross, because at Peterson, Berk Cross, we specialize in you. Thanks for joining. Next week, we are going to be doing we've been doing a lot of classic ones. Next week, we're going to be doing the tale of the fisherman and his wife. This is one that, if you know it, it's a very, very fun tale. Normally, what I always find in these stories, it's the dad that's the dad or the husband that's a bit goofy and a bit slow. You think your classic 80s sitcom sort of thing. And this one, I'm going to warn you ahead of time, this one doesn't make good for the wife. The wife is kind of the antagonist here. So, but it's a great story. It teaches a very valuable lesson that we need to keep in mind for our law even today. And I hope to see you then. So again, if you enjoyed this, if you have questions ahead of time or follow-up questions, leave them in the comments. I do check the comments throughout the week, as well as give a call to the firm, and we'll be seeing you next week.